Hi, everybody. This is your announcement for Philosophy 101 for the week of April 13th. Okay, so we are continuing our work in Module 4, which is on the nature of justice. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit. I graded the quizzes from last week where you had to answer a couple of questions about nonviolent resistance from the article that I gave you. And one thing that I noticed is, I guess, how the idea of nonviolent resistance was interpreted was interesting, the interpretation that some of you had. So, and one thing I just wanted to talk about a little bit is that when we apply nonviolent resistance, it's usually in circumstances that are more than a disagreement between individuals. Okay, I mean, some students wrote about maybe a disagreement that happened at work between a couple of people, or a hypothetical situation where maybe two people are arguing or don't agree on something, and so they talked about, you know, not resorting to violence to settle that conflict. And while that is nonviolence, it's not necessarily nonviolent resistance. Okay, so in the article it talks about meeting evil. Okay, and so that's kind of the kicker there. That's the catch, is that nonviolent resistance is a response to evil. So, okay, what does that mean? And so this kind of forces us, and I was thinking about this, I guess we have to think about what is evil in that context. And if you've watched the film At the River I Stand, maybe you've seen that. Okay, so by evil, we're talking about situations in which someone is actually confronted by an evil. And so I'm not talking in, necessarily a religious sense, like, the devil or Satan or anything like that. But what I'm talking about is a situation in which evil is practiced. So racial discrimination is what we're focusing on in At the River I Stand. Okay, and indeed for all of the civil rights movement. And so going back to Plato and Socrates talking about justice and what justice is and is not, he talks about that even in the face of injustice, that it is not just to harm anyone, right? So, and that's where Dr. King comes in with his philosophy of nonviolent resistance, that the way to meet these situations where one is being, discriminated against because of race, and we're talking about, being forced to move to the back of the bus, or being told that you cannot eat in this restaurant or shop in this store, or being taunted, okay, or heckled by people. By nonviolent resistance, he's talking about meeting that situation by not striking back, right? So it really goes beyond, just a disagreement between people, which, like I said, that's the use of nonviolence, but it's not necessarily nonviolent resistance. Okay, so I hope you see the difference there, because that's a very important distinction. Okay? All right, so like I said, we continue with Module 4 on justice. And so just going back to the learning activities and assessments to show you where you're at. So I hope that you watched my commentaries, okay, because those are important to give you context and background. And then also you're reading this summary and analysis from Plato's Republic. Now, in this summary and analysis, we have Socrates talking about justice. And so this is an analysis of the text, okay? So this is not please don't say this is what Plato wrote, okay, or what Socrates said, because it's not. So this talks about, kind of like we did for Aristotle, it talks about Socrates. Okay. All right. So in this, and I think I said this in the lesson announcement, you want to focus on what Socrates says about justice. And he talks about, it can be confusing because he talks about what justice is not. Okay, and so this is the paragraph I want you to focus in on. That Socrates observes that people make mistakes, thinking an enemy a friend, and vice versa. And then, so this is just Socrates going through the whole argument with Polemarchus, who's his student. They're talking, but then he goes further. And Socrates points out that when humans are harmed, they become worse in terms of human virtues, just like a horse who is harmed who becomes worse. Okay, and that's kind of the gist of Socrates' view of justice. And then the other side of this you're going to look at is what Thrasymachus says. Let's see if this talks about, okay, so Thrasymachus talks about justice in terms of what is right for the stronger person. Okay, and so I talk about that more in my video lectures. Okay, so make sure you watch that because you need to know that. So what we're looking at when you watch At the River I Stand is kind of the operation of these two forms of justice, these two views of justice. One is Socrates' view where he talks about it is not just to harm anyone. And Thrasymachus, who is a guy who comes in to talk to Socrates during that conversation, who says justice is what is in the best interest of the powerful. Okay, so those are two different ways of looking at justice. All right, and that's what I want you to focus on, are those two very different ways of interpreting justice. Okay, so I hope that you have watched At the River I Stand, or you're planning to watch it soon. Remember, you have to either rent it, unless you can find it on the internet for free, then let me know. And your discussion is due on April 19th. So let me just move ahead. Okay, that's the self-check quiz. I think you've all have done that. Okay, here is our discussion. So read the instructions. So in the questions, I'm going to ask you to summarize in your own words both Socrates and Thrasymachus' position or ideal on the nature of justice. What did justice mean to each of them? Okay, so you have to talk about both of them. And then the second question is about the film. From the film, in what ways do the mayor of the city of Memphis and the city council of Memphis react to the demands of the striking sanitation workers? How does their reaction reflect Thrasymachus' position or ideal on the nature of justice? Give a specific example from the film to support your response. Okay, and then the last question is your view. So which view of justice, Socrates or Thrasymachus, is more prevalent in society today? What do you see happening? Give examples to support your response. Okay, so that's what you'll be working on for this week, and that is due on April 19th. Okay, and that's the due date. So remember, you have to get your initial post in 48 hours before that so you can post replies to 2 classmates. Okay, so that's what we're talking about, kind of a heavy topic for this week, the last 2 weeks, but I think it's a really important one. And it makes me think about everything that's happening now with this global pandemic we're in the midst of, and people dying, and it's really an unfortunate situation, and we're all just trying to stay safe and stay home. Do you see injustice happening in the midst of all of this? And if you do, what is it? So just a little question to think about, and I'm going to ask you to maybe comment on that in the comments below the announcement. Okay? All right, I want to compliment you. Everyone is doing their work in this class. It is awesome because I look at who did the assignments, and you're all doing the assignments and pretty much on time. So good for you. Kudos to all of you. Let's keep that up. 100% participation. Okay? So good job. All right, everyone. I got to end this. It's 10 minutes, so it's a long video. So have a good week. Stay safe. Stay home. And I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye.